2 minutes, too. That's great. So I've got Rob Southwick, Santo Jonathan Zeidman, and Monique Berry.
Hello. I had a set of cards seated. Do I have an idea of how much time is available, please?
Yes, we're going to have 2 minutes for you, Mr. Southwick.
2 minutes. Okay. Well, my name is Rob Southwick. I'm a company of Southwick Associates. We specialize in fish and wildlife economics. Our background, our clients are primarily state fish and wildlife agencies, trade associations, and nonprofit conservation groups. You've seen our report. I'll try to touch on just probably a couple of major points given the time available. The information we put together is based on the best information that is available. There's not a whole lot of information available. We try to make the most reasonable assumptions possible. The primary point I do want to share is that using EcoTrust data that you've probably seen that looks at the amount of value that's lost to individual anglers and the areas that's lost to individual for fishing for particular species and by modes of fishing. We took that information and we matched it up with California Fish and Game data that reports the proportion of fishing trips related to different species. That's their search data. Putting it together, we can see that certain types of fisheries have a greater impact on overall fishing participation than others. Then we can look at each of the three proposals. Number one, actually the third proposal clearly has the worst impact. We ran these numbers before we actually knew which group had 40 each proposal. So we did our work of just numbers to us. But proposal number 3 has 135% greater impact on fishing participation, on the trips, that is. That's 135% greater economic loss, jobs, tax revenues, retail sales. Proposal number 1 represents the next greatest loss, and that's a 59% potential loss of trips. That means the best way to look at it proportionally is 59% greater loss compared to proposal number 2, the baseline proposal number 2. That has the least amount of impact. So proposal 3 looks to have 135% greater impact on the California economy than proposal number 2. Number 1 has the second greatest amount. Talking fast, due to the limited amount of time, there's a couple things I'd like to touch on if possible. Number 1 is that we're constantly hearing that there's going to be a big flood of... All right, I guess I'm done.
Rob, I think we have a task force member who'd like to address you.
Okay, just finish your thought, and then we have a couple of questions.
Okay,
but thank you for respecting the clock.
Yes, very nice of you.
That.
Thank you. Been trained by those people. The one point that our background is we specialize in economics of people in the outdoors. I'm a wildlife viewer myself. I love taking people outdoors to see wildlife in Florida where I live. It's a thrill. But wildlife viewing, kayaking is not the full replacement for sport fishing. Fish and Wildlife Service tells us that it takes 2 wildlife viewers to equal the expenditures of one angler. $1,400 a year are spent by anglers, $640 spent a year by wildlife viewers in Southern California. This is the average. So you need 2 for 1. And right now, thank goodness, there's no restrictions on kayaking and wildlife viewing. Let's keep it that way. But the pool of people you draw from is not as great for wildlife viewing. So I know I'm kind of rushing through this quick, but looking at the logic, why people go outdoors, literature shows you to spend time with friends and family in a natural setting. That's still there. They can still do that. They can go out there. There's no restrictions in access. We don't know where these new substitute sources of revenues would come from. So that's my point there. We don't see it. The logic's not quite there.
Okay, thank you.
I had 2 quick questions for you.
Okay.
We've been talking about economics here all afternoon as various individuals testified about the economic impacts of their various activities. And one of the concerns I had was we were given some EcoTrust data that we looked at, and that's been kind of the basis of what we've been evaluating. And it talks about the fact that the difference between proposal 1 and 2 is that the total economic impact is only $300,000. Yet I look at your report that you submitted, and the numbers are significantly higher. Can you tell me why are your numbers so much higher than theirs?
Well, I don't know how people can look at the EcoTrust data to look at the economic impacts of the proposals. Their studies do not look at economic impacts. They looked at the value to individual anglers for a few specific species, but not the economic impacts, but the expenditures. That is not in their studies. So I don't know where that came from. So we took the information to look at the proportional impacts on participation. to get economic impact data, you have to go to NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, and Cal Fish and Game. So that $300,000, when I saw that in there, that is strictly to just commercial fisheries, their economic impacts. Their study reports economic impacts to commercial fisheries, not to recreational fishing. You've got a little bit of research in there onto the charter boat fleet, the CPFV, I think y'all refer to it here. But that's only 8% of recreational fishing in Southern California. So the massive recreational fishing, the shoreline fishing, which I said before, is 75% of recreational fishing in Southern California is shoreline fishing. 15 and 16% is boat fishing. That's not even addressed in their study. So I don't know where that number came from. Those people who are saying it need to defend it. I can't speak to that at all. It's not accurate.
As a follow-up question, we were submitted as part of some testimony earlier a letter from NOAA that talks about, specifically addresses your report and talks about, it talks about the methodology that was used. So both of these reports can't be right. So which is correct?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah. Well, I can address...
That would be what we call a disruption.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to, because they're completely, we're